Mock Draft Monday. We're back with another rendition of this year's NFL draft. And in this mock draft, our draft guru, Austin Host, is going to be breaking down his thoughts, his fits, where he thinks certain players are going to go in the NFL draft. And of course, this is based on what he thinks will happen, not necessarily what he would think he would do or what he thinks should happen, but necessarily what he thinks will happen, which of course there is a definite fine line there. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you are new. Leave a like on today's video as well if you're excited for the actual NFL draft and this crazy NFL offseason. This is going to be the place you want to be. Subscribe to so you don't miss out on everything in the NFL world. Of course, a crazy offseason awaits us after the Los Angeles Rams won the Super Bowl. And here we are, Austin, with your Jaguars, first overall. We've got Jacksonville on the clock. Last year, of course, had the #1 pick as well, went with Trevor Lawrence. Do you see them holding on to this pick again this year? And then where would you have them going?
Yeah, so for this pick, I think it's been pretty clear that Doug Peterson wants to fix the trenches. He's mentioned it multiple times in interviews, and where he wants to get better with this roster is up front, especially on that offensive line. An offensive line that, going into the year, you thought could be at least an average offensive line. They played pretty poorly overall. So I think addressing that need is really, really important at this juncture. Evan Neal's going to be my pick. Athletic, 6'7" frame, and a guy that can really get after it. I feel comfortable with him at the #1 pick. I know historically speaking, when you take tackles with that #1 pick, it doesn't always go according to plan. We've seen guys like Eric Fisher just not really work out in the league. Jake Long is another example of that as well. But Evan Neal is exactly what this team needs. You need that franchise left tackle, a guy to protect Trevor Lawrence's blind side. And to me, you have to go with it if you are Jacksonville. I like the other players on the board. There's a lot of talented guys that can help out your defense. But right now, I think that Jacksonville's eyeing up Evan Neal.
Evan Neal here goes first overall. Of course, there's some long-term upside there for him with his athleticism at the tackle spot. Has played right tackle and left tackle in his career in college. So it does give them some flexibility and some stability along the offensive line there in Duval County. Pick #2, we've got the Detroit Lions here now at this point. Of course, very interesting season for them under head coach Dan Campbell in their first year. They won more games than I think a lot of people were expecting. They were very competitive in some as well. Lost on a few last-second field goals. And for the most part, I think it was a pretty good season for them, just given the talent they have on their roster. This year, it's a real chance to improve this team, Austin. Where do they get it started?
There's a lot to build on with this roster you had mentioned. You saw some glimpses of this team really progressing throughout the season. Yes, obviously they hold the #2 pick for a reason. However, there were a lot of things to be positive about going off of last year. I honestly have them going with Kayvon Thibodeaux. Kayvon Thibodeaux is that guy that can really transform your front seven with his ability to rush the passer, the ability to stop the run. He does both very, very well and at a high level. The thing you have to like about him is he has that long-term potential. The physicals are off the charts. And there's so much more that you can mold this guy into. I think that's the wise choice for the Lions. You're considering him or Aiden Hutchinson, but I think it's very possible that Thibodeaux gives you that long-term upside just slightly more. It's tough to pick between these two prospects because they're very, very close in terms of where they're at now and where they can be in the future.
Thibodeaux does have tremendous upside, Austin. Real quickly, I want to ask you, at this point last year, we kind of had narrowed it down to Trevor Lawrence first overall, Zach Wilson second overall to the Jets. We felt really confident about that by this point. Here, our mock drafts are a little bit less pointed. We have, a little bit of shakeup in pick 1 sometimes, a little bit of shakeup in pick 2. How open do you think this class is for who the top 2 picks are going to be?
This is one of the most wide open classes we've had in the last 10 years. I can tell you that for a fact because we don't really know who's going where. There's no guaranteed #1 pick. There's no guaranteed #2 pick. This entire class is fluid. That's why you want to be subscribed because this changes according to the latest news that we are receiving on our channel. And that's why it's different almost every week. You're listening to headlines, you're listening to insiders, what they're saying about where teams could potentially go. And that's why it's really, really important because week in, week out, we don't really know who's even going to be the #1 pick. There's no guarantees. And that's why I think going through this process is going to be really fun. And the draft is going to be insanely hectic.
Most definitely, there can be a lot yet to change up to this point. And this is just a reminder here that today's video is brought to you by Manscaped, one of the best in the world when it comes to men's grooming and care routines. Use code utility20 for 20% off plus free worldwide shipping for any Manscaped product. Again, that is code utility20. Moving on to pick 3, we got the Houston Texans here, Austin. Another team where They already had a head coach turnover from David Culley last year to a new coach this year. Pick 3 overall here. PFF says needs every position. Where are you going to address first here in Houston?
Lovie Smith. He's a defensive-minded head coach. He's had some really good pass rushers in his time in Chicago. And honestly, I think they're going to go with Aiden Hutchinson. I know there's a definite need at that tackle spot, but I think when you are looking there at the Houston Texans, it's really tough to narrow down what they want to do. You're under a new regime, but Lovie Smith historically loves defenses. He's a defensive-minded coach, and he's going to see a guy like Aiden Hutchinson be a transformational guy along that defense. They're looking for that core building block at that edge spot, and they get that with him. I think it's pretty clear that they're going to be focusing a lot of their energy into that defense, and it's all going to start at that number 3 pick.
Hutchinson would be a phenomenal building block, like you said, for that defensive line in general and for the Houston Texans as they look to move forward. Austin, real quickly here, you don't have to give me any landing spots. Does Deshaun Watson get traded before the NFL draft?
I think he actually does get traded for the draft. There's a couple of cases he's still trying to work out, but if they do get to that conclusion there, I think it really opens up the trading gates. And I think a team that might be interested is the Minnesota Vikings. I don't think they'll pull the trigger. But I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are actually going to be the team that lands Deshaun Watson. They have some really talented players on the roster, which Houston has been craving. They like trading for tried and true, commodities, and that's what they would be getting from that Tampa Bay roster.
Very interesting there. That's going to be something to keep our eyes on. Now on to pick 4, my New York Jets here at this point of the draft. I feel like there's a ton of different ways they can go. We talk about it all the time, Austin. Flexibility is king in the NFL. You need to have different pathways to getting where you want to go. And the Jets here with picks 4 and 10, I feel like they have a ton of different ways that they can improve this football team. Where are you going to start them off here 4th overall?
Derek Stingley. I think they're going to look at that corner room and say, we can improve here. I know that some people think that they don't need a corner. However, when you look at how talented he is, and you put him alongside of Bryce Hall, that's going to be a really nice tandem for years to come. Dynamic athlete. And this is a guy that can really help out this secondary long-term. Very well could be a future Pro Bowler. I see him as a multi-time Pro Bowler, potentially all pro level kind of player. And that's where he sits. Some people think he's going to go outside that top 10 because of the injuries that have happened over the last 2 years. I don't see it being that way once he tests at the combine, and then you get to see him a little more on one-on-ones. There's so much to love about what he brings as a prospect.
I can see it right now. New York Jets fans, if you're typing in the comments, take a deep breath here. I know you're going to say, whoa, we're one of the most injury-prone teams. We had the most injuries this past season. Take a deep breath. Derek Stingley's been injured in the past. It doesn't mean anything for his long-term future. There's players who come out of college never injured and then have serious injuries and serious injury issues in the NFL. It's very possible that if you went in a different way, you'd actually have more injury issues with another player. Just because he has some injury concerns in the past doesn't mean that they're going to stick with him long term. Pick 5, we got the New York Giants here now at this point of the draft, Austin. Of course, new GM there, Joe Shane. Also brand new head coach, Brian Dable. How do the Giants look to improve?
I think the New York Giants can start up front. I think there's been a pretty common theme for our mock drafts. Ike Ekwonu is going to be my selection. Reason I go him over Charles Cross, I think he's a little bit more of a polished prospect. And when you look at how great he is in the run game, it's going to help out Saquon Barkley tremendously. They're trying to, really give Daniel Jones a fair chance. This is a pivotal point in his career. He's got to really put up some numbers and put up some wins, more importantly, in order to secure his job long term. Ike Ekwonu really helps him out in that area. They're going to be able to run the ball effectively, hopefully next year. And looking at what they need, it's definitely got to go on that offensive line. A couple of spots on defense that I considered, at the linebacker spot, edge spot. However, I deem that the tackle spot was really, really critical for this roster.
Ekwonu is going to be a phenomenal addition there for the New York Giants for sure. And Carolina at pick 6 probably was hoping to see Ekwonu available for them. Not available for them now at this point. Do they go with another offensive tackle themselves, or where do you have Carolina eyeing?
And this is where the big changeup happens. Malik Willis is going off the board here at number 6. I talked about it, before the Senior Bowl. He's going to be that high riser. Why? Because he has all the intangibles. This happens every single year with prospects that, throwing wise, don't necessarily have the best seasons. We've seen it with Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, guys that hold those physical traits that are really, really exciting for teams. He has the legs to do it as well. He's going to be a little bit more of a project as a passer. However, he's the best rushing quarterback in this entire draft. And there's so much to love about his arm talents as well. Very, very lively arm, and a guy that's willing to learn. I think Carolina this would be their second round with a running quarterback. I mean, they had some great success with Cam Newton, and then now you bring in a guy like Malik Willis, who is just as dynamic with the ball.
Malik Willis is one of those guys who is definitely going to be capable of raising the ceiling for an NFL team and getting them to places that they didn't assume they could. I think long-term, he's going to be a really, really good player. And I think he is the top quarterback in this class, at least in my estimation as well. Pick 7, we got the New York Giants again. Of course, Ike Ekwonu was your pick 5th overall. Now, I know Giants fans here probably have their fingers crossed for a second offensive lineman. Do you think that's reasonable, or do you have them going somewhere else?
Yeah, it's really tough at this point to take another offensive lineman. There's a guy in Tyler Linderbaum that I think would be interesting. However, I'm not going in that direction. George Karlaftis is going to be my pick. They have to address that edge spot. That's important. So once again, and a lot of our mock drafts, we've been very, very focused on the trenches, and they get an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman. This Giants team is definitely heading in the right direction. They're very fortunate to have these 2 top 7 selections, but George Karlaftis is going to be able to help out this team, especially against the run, which they did have struggle a little bit against last year. However, they're going to improve, and I love this for the New York Giants.
Karlaftis is definitely a phenomenal addition onto that defensive line. You put him across from Leonard Williams, and this team has really improved their trench play on both sides of the football. Pick 8, the Atlanta Falcons here. Of course, some question marks around Matt Ryan's future with the team, exactly which way Arthur Smith is going to lead these guys moving forward. It's going to be interesting for them. They've got a lot of questions to answer this offseason. Calvin Ridley as well. You're looking at him. Cordero Patterson's headed toward free agency. For Atlanta, Austin, is it just best player available here, or are you targeting something specific?
I'm glad you brought that up. It's going to be Kyle Hamilton. Reason he falls so far is just because of team need, in the teams above him. At this point, Kyle Hamilton, it's hard to see him drop past that 8 mark. I mean, he's just such a talented player on the field, one of the best players in the draft, very well could be a top 3 player in this entire class based on how good of a football player he is, especially, at his position, he really excels. And I think the Atlanta Falcons are just going to be looking to accumulate talent, not necessarily trying to, fill certain spots at this point, because they're not super close to, really getting to the actual contention. And when you're a team like Atlanta, who's rebuilding, just take the best player available, make it fit, make it work. And that's what you're doing with Kyle Hamilton.
He's going to be a phenomenal fit next to Richie Grant if he did land there in Atlanta. And like you said, Austin, I think best player available here does make a ton of sense to them. Honestly, in my opinion, if he were to go 1st overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think it would be a good selection for Jacksonville. That's how good of a player I think that this guy is. And I think Atlanta here, even though it's not the, sexiest position, whether that's cornerback, wide receiver, quarterback, you're still getting a really great guy here in Kyle Hamilton. He's a phenomenal piece, and he's going to really open up things you can do defensively. Pick 9, the Denver Broncos, who are probably hoping to see Kyle Hamilton's name available. Now at this spot, where do they go from here? I know you've mocked some tackles in the past. You've also looked at a few other positions. Austin, what do you have the Broncos doing?
I think the Denver Broncos have done a really good job building that offensive line, but there's one more spot that they got to go. Another tackle. You're going to have Bowles on one side and then Charles Cross on the other. I think Charles Cross, one of the premier pass protectors in this entire class. I think they've done a really good job building the infrastructure, getting it set up for whoever the next quarterback is. Now, I definitely could have went with the QB spot here, but I think they're going to be more willing to address that in either free agency or in the trade market. More likely, that trade market is where they're, really focusing their attention to. That's why I take a guy like Charles Cross, because that offensive line is going to be pretty good with the addition of him. One of the better players available, and definitely a spot of need for this team.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of ways that Denver can improve this offseason. Quarterback, that's going to be the real position of question for this team. But assuming they have this pick, Charles Cross, 9th overall, that does make a ton of sense. And as we transition here to my New York Jets again, of course, Derek Stingley, 4th overall, kind of fits Joe Douglas's draft history of athletes. Pick 10. Do you see that trend continuing, or where do you have the Jets looking at this spot?
I'm looking at a dynamic playmaker, Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is one of those really exciting prospects with the ball in his hands. Super phenomenal route runner as well. Doesn't have the biggest physicals in terms of his overall stature and length, but a guy that just makes a lot of plays happen when he gets the ball in his hands. Honestly, the New York Jets need a little bit more dynamism to this team. They already have Corey Davis in place. I totally get that. Elijah Moore as well is a really, really talented receiver. But I think a guy like Garrett Wilson could be phenomenal, because that trio would actually be a very, very formidable wide receiver room. They're obviously going to try to make some improvements at the tight end room as well. They feel they probably have it figured out at the running back spot. So honestly, if they make that pick and then maybe can address a tight end a little bit later on, I think that would really go a long ways in helping Zach Wilson.
Of course, the Jets do have 4 picks in the top 40. There's also rumors right now that Panthers wide receiver Robbie Anderson would like to end up back in New York. But still, even at the end of the day, if Robbie Anderson finds his way back to the Jets, going Garrett Wilson here makes a ton of sense. He's a way better receiver than Robbie Anderson has ever been or ever will be. And I think the potential here, putting him with Zach Wilson and Corey Davis, you really do improve what this team can be. 11, the Washington Commanders here now at this spot of the draft, Austin. I know you're a fan of what this team has in pretty much every position other than the quarterback spot. So does that lock them into taking a QB 11th overall?
I just feel like it's time for them. And I think they probably are feeling that same kind of pressure. And I'm looking at the quarterback spot. I'm going to go with the guy that's really gained a lot of steam. That's actually Sam Howell. This has not been the prototypical pick, but he's been gaining a lot of steam in the draft community. A lot of people like what they saw from him at the Senior Bowl. Definitely has shown some maturity throughout this process. He's also really good at running the football. That's a really underrated part of his game. So looking at Sam Howell and what he can bring, a little bit of dynamism to that offense. And when you look at where they're at, he doesn't have to start right away. You can get another year of a Taylor Heineke. And then honestly, Sam Howell doesn't have a lot of pressure heading into year one.
For sure here, Sam Howell, someone who in his time at UNC won a ton of games and was a really big part of that Tar Heels roster coming into Washington. I think he's going to be a huge piece for them to add. Pick 12, we got the Minnesota Vikings here now at this point, Austin. I know we've looked at cornerbacks for them. We've looked at linebacker. With the current regime there in Minnesota, it seems like they're pretty content with Kirk Cousins. Is it about the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, for me, it's going to start on the defensive side of the ball. They've definitely had some struggles. I like what they have on the roster. You could consider an edge actually at this spot. For me, I just think there's too many talented corners on the board. I'm going to go with Ahmad Gardner. He is going to be my pick out of Cincinnati, a very, very common pick. When you have a guy as talented as Ahmad Gardner at a definite position of need, we don't know exactly where the Vikings are going to be this offseason. Rashad Breeland gone, Patrick Peterson is going to be a free agent. They don't have a lot of money to work with, so we don't even know if they can really work out that money and find him coming back. So they're going to have to make some improvements somewhere in that secondary, and it's got to come through the draft if it can't be free agency. So that's why Ahmad Gardner has to be the pick to me. You know, I know a lot of Viking fans have PTSD with the whole cornerback selections. However, it's a must for me with round one.
If Sauce Gardner is the selection here for Minnesota Vikings fans, take a sigh of relief. He's really, really good. I think this is a phenomenal pickup. He's one of my favorite players in this year's class as well. I think he's going to be extremely productive in the NFL, and I think he's going to be a great cornerback pickup for the Vikings. 13, we're looking at the Cleveland Browns. Of course, head coach Kevin Stefanski there, probably scratching his head a little bit about Baker Mayfield, his long-term stay in the NFL. Of course, heading into that 5th year on his rookie contract, it's going to be a big prove-it year for him. Do you have to look wide receiver to help him out this year?
Yeah, I think you need to establish a true red zone threat. They don't currently have one on the roster I feel super comfortable with. That's going to be Treylon Burks, 6'3" frame, great catch radius, and a guy that you can really trust in that red zone area as well. But the thing that's really critical about him is his ability to make plays happen after he catches the football. And a lot of times when I'm looking at some of these prospects, what can they do with the ball in their hands themselves? Are they going down right away? Are they fighting for extra yards? And Treylon Burks is the perfect example of a guy that will not give up on a play at that receiver spot. And I have him going here at 13.
Now we move on to pick 14 here of the Baltimore Ravens. Of course, another team here that I could see making it back into contention as early as next season if they get this pick right and a few others that they have in this year's draft. Austin, where are you starting it out here for Baltimore?
David Ojabo is going to be the pick. They're going to be looking for an edge in this draft, in my opinion. And I also had mentioned secondary in prior videos, but David Ojabo, one of those unsung heroes on that Michigan defense, a guy that was insanely productive, got overshadowed by Aiden Hutchinson. But when you look at the fit with Baltimore, I think he could be a phenomenal edge rusher for this team. Super talented guy that can get after it. They were definitely missing Matthew Judon, and I think David Ojabo is a perfect replacement long term.
I think David Ojabo is one of the biggest winners of Aiden Hutchinson's great season this past year at Michigan, because when scouts were coming to the building to check out Aiden Hutchinson, they were in position to be watching David Ojabo have another great season himself. Ton of production there for the Wolverines, and I think he's really cemented himself as a top half of the first round type of pick, and we see here Baltimore grabbing him 14th overall. Pick 15 here, we got the Philadelphia Eagles at this spot of the draft. There's a few different things that they could look forward to add to this roster and really improve with their 3 first-round picks. Where do you have Howie Roseman looking first?
I think they're going to look corner with this first pick. Trent McDuffie, really talented corner, and a guy that I think they've been missing on that back end. Darius Slay was really, really good this year. But Trent McDuffie, you put him into that secondary. And honestly, with the division they're in, you definitely have to beat the Cowboys, and they generally have a lot of talented receivers. I mean, you saw what CD Lamb and Amari Cooper are, and we'll see what happens with Michael Gallup. But, you know, that's definitely what you have to do. When you're trying to win this division, you got to beat Dallas. So you got to be pretty solid in that secondary. Trent McDuffie is going to go a long ways in helping fix that.
He definitely will, and they have pick 16 here as well, so they're going back-to-back at this point of the NFL draft. To complement that pick, are they sticking on defense or looking offense?
We're actually going to help out this offensive line. Kenyon Green could be a really good fit into this Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. Generally, they've had really, really good offensive line play, but I actually have them going Kenyon Green for this offense. I mean, when they're trying to get out in space and they run sweeps and tosses, you're looking for a guy like Kenyon Green to really lead the way and get to that second and third level. He can get downfield quickly and spring huge runs for guys like Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell.
An extremely agile guard, and I think he's going to really help them in the run game, and also going to be able to help them set up stuff in the screen game as well. I think that's going to be huge for this Eagles team, getting a little bit more yardage on every single play just because of his ability to block, especially up into the second level. It's going to spring some bigger runs, and is also going to help them on a play-to-play basis. Pick 17, we're looking at the Los Angeles Chargers here. I know there's a few different ways to look. Linebacker could make some sense. You could also look at the interior defensive line. Right tackle to replace Storm Norton, that also makes some sense. Austin, where you have the Chargers going here?
Yeah, super tough with where the Chargers are, but I think one of the more glaring needs that occurred last year, especially in that pivotal game against the Raiders, was that interior, that defensive line. Jordan Davis, it's really tough to look at him and say that you don't want to draft him with this pick. He's going to be for sure phenomenal on those first 2 downs. The third down is when you got a little bit of question marks, but he made some strides as a pass rusher as a whole. I love him here for the Chargers. He is going to be an elite run stopper in this league. We saw the transformation when Vita Vea ended up in Tampa Bay and how that kind of changed the complexion of that defense. That's essentially what Jordan Davis can contribute to an NFL defense.
He's going to be huge, no pun intended there, up the middle for the Los Angeles Chargers. He's going to really help open up stuff as well for Joey Bosa, who has really improved himself in the run game. You put now Jordan Davis, who's going to require 2 bodies blocking him nearly every single time up the middle. It opens everything up for Bosa there in LA. Pick 18, we've got the New Orleans Saints here, a team that has some questions going forward. Jameis Winston not under contract. We're not exactly sure about Michael Thomas's future with the team, despite reports that they do want to keep him around. Of course, they are in a little bit of a salary cap purgatory as well as we speak. There's a lot of questions about this roster. How important is this draft for them, Austin? And then where do you have them going?
That's absolutely huge, because you're going to have to fill a lot of different needs. This team, I know what it shows for team needs, but there's going to be a lot more of them as time comes, because they're going to have to make some really, really tough decisions, some roster cuts. Jameis Winston, I don't know if he'll be able to be back next year, truthfully. I think we have to be completely honest with ourselves. Where they're at cap-wise, they're not really going to be able to afford Jameis Winston. No Sean Payton there anymore. They got to go quarterback, in my opinion. Matt Corral is going to be that pick for me. Something that was really impressive to me was his jump from 2020 to 2021. He played in 3 more games this past season and had 8 less interceptions. That shows the overall growth under Lane Kiffin. It was terrific to see. Matt Corral, obviously with the injury, is going to push him down boards a little bit. He was near that top 10 before the injury. Now I think that's going to affect his draft stock a little bit. However, he ends up with the New Orleans Saints team that has a lot of weapons in Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. Hopefully they're able to keep both of those guys, but he may end up in a situation where there's not a lot of weapons left. So I guess we'll have to see what the Saints do. And Mickey Loomis has got some really, really big decisions.
One of the best ways in the NFL to relieve yourself from some salary cap struggles is to draft a rookie quarterback and have him be your long-term starter, because of course for the next 4 years you're going to have him very cheap before that 5th-year option. Kind of will help reset the tables there in New Orleans, and hopefully he's the right guy as well to really advance what this football team could be. Pick 19, the Eagles here yet again, of course. Picks 15 and 16, we went with Trent McDuffie, Kenyon Green. Austin, complete the trifecta here. The Eagles at 19 pick.
Yeah, I'm going actually with a surprising selection here. I'm going to go Jameson Williams. this is exactly what Jalen Reagor was supposed to be heading into this season. Or, obviously in his career, he has not lived up to that. But this is one of those shake-up picks where Jameson Williams is going to fall a little bit, and the Eagles might want to take a little flyer on him, considering he has the injury. He's not going to be able to play right away. But I think the long-term reward is there. An absolute speedster, a guy that can burn defenses consistently down the field. And if you look at Jalen Hurts, I think that would be a big-time weapon. That's not the kind of receiver Devontae Smith is, but I think Jameson Williams would be a great complement. And I look at it as this offense could be insanely dangerous with that trio.
Most definitely would be. He would improve greatly the ceiling here, also give Jalen Hurts another option to throw the football to when he's healthy. Moving on, we're going to stay in Pennsylvania here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, at this point, of course, there's a few options here that make sense to me. Bernard Ryman out of Central Michigan, if they're looking for a tackle. Tyler Linderbaum in the interior could make some sense as well. Of course, since they no longer have Pouncey. And then you also look at the quarterback spot, Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh himself. Any of those three guys on the board here for you?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it there. Kenny Pickett's going to be the pick. I would love to select an offensive lineman, but I just don't feel comfortable what we currently have for the Pittsburgh Steelers on their roster. I don't love, the whole Dwayne Haskins thing. I don't see that as a conducive option. You want to have a guy that you can actually build up your team with, and that's Kenny Pickett. The one, drawback on him, I mean, he was unwilling to measure his hand size. However, I think that's been a little overstated, announced to the media, I guess you could say. But the whole Kenny Pickett to Pittsburgh just makes too much sense to me. He's a winner. He has a really good frame overall, and he's one of those high risers. Now, people are generally cautious of those high risers, but Joe Burrow was able to be that and honestly have a very, very successful career so far. Kenny Pickett to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have to have an option long-term, and they probably most likely will do it through the draft.
I'm sure that selection will leave Steelers fans with a huge smile on their face. Moving on to pick 21, we got the New England Patriots here. Now at this point, Austin, Drake London, he was a favorite of yours to mock to New England. He's sitting out here on the board. Any other options here for you if you're the Patriots?
Yeah, I'm going to go with receiver. That's going to be Chris Olave. Chris Olave brings another element to this offense. A guy, once again, that knows how to get open, knows how to beat guys deep. He was a really, really big play machine for Ohio State this past season. And that's exactly what the New England Patriots need. A little bit more dynamism, a little more speed in that wide receiver room. I like what they've built so far on this offense. They have two really, really good tight ends. But at this point, I think you have to look at Chris Olave as a must for this team, or just taking a receiver in general. You talked about Drake London, definitely can help out this team, but I'd like to add a little bit more speed on the perimeter.
Chris Olave definitely does add that. One of the favorite connections for Justin Fields back at Ohio State. And then, of course, this year as well was huge for CJ Stroud and the Buckeyes. Pick 22, we're looking at the Las Vegas Raiders here now. Of course, a lot of turnover there. We got new coach, new general manager with Mike Mayock out. What's your thoughts on the Raiders long term, and where do they go here?
This is a tough selection to kind of nail down because we consider that this offensive line definitely had a shakeup, and I think that they very well could look along that offensive line again. At this point, when you are the Raiders, there's nothing that's really off limits at this point. I definitely think they have to look on that interior. But personally, I'm actually going to go with tackle. Bernard Ryman is going to be my selection here. Just considering where they're at, their offensive line was pretty shaky this year. Gave up a ton of pressures, ton of sacks as well. This Raiders team is definitely going to be looking themselves long and hard in the mirror. You bring in a guy like Josh McDaniels, who has had really, really great offensive line play at his time in New England, and I think that's going to continue here. That's going to be a focal point for this team.
Ryman, definitely a good addition there for the Vegas offensive line. And then 23rd overall, we got the Arizona Cardinals. Now at this point, Austin, Cardinals, of course, started out the year so hot, kind of finished the year on a bad note. A lot of rumors around Kyler Murray right now and his leadership. Where do you have them going to get this thing back on track?
And this is going to be a little bit different from the prior mocks. Not a corner, surprisingly. It's Tyler Linderbaum. Great value here for the Arizona Cardinals. I think a lot of fans should be excited if this is the scenario that plays out. From a value standpoint, this is an A+ level selection. Really smart center, impactful guy, plays with really low leverage, and really gets up into the chest of defensive linemen. And, they always say low man wins, and that's exactly what he does day in, day out in a lot of his reps. So Tyler Linderbaum to the Arizona Cardinals. I think this is a phenomenal selection.
Right, and he gives you some versatility as well. Can play him at guard, could also stick him at center long-term down the road. Gives you a lot of flexibility if you're Arizona, improves that offensive line, is going to help improve the run game and also protect Kyler Murray long-term. Pick 24, the Dallas Cowboys here now, of course, an interesting team. We've looked at cornerback quite a bit for them. Could Jerry Jones look at Drake London and say, well, I kind of like taking wideouts when no one's expecting it?
Yeah, I think he might actually bring that to the table because nobody was expecting CeeDee Lamb really to be that selection there. I mean, a couple people were, but honestly, that kind of got a lot of us by surprise. I think Trayvon Walker is a good fit into this defense. They have to improve that defensive line, especially that edge spot. And I look at the Dallas Cowboys as a really good landing spot for that. We have thought about safety in a lot of our mocks. We thought about corner, but I think with Trayvon Walker's upside, they're going to see that similar to how they saw Randy Gregory, a guy that physically was just super imposing. I think the production doesn't really match what the talent is with him. He only had 5 sacks this past year. However, when you look at him physically, this is a developmental player. The Dallas Cowboys have done a really nice job with guys rushing the passer, and we saw what Micah Parsons was able to do on this defense. Dan Quinn is going to absolutely elevate Trayvon Walker.
Cowboys fans, do not worry if the production did not match the talent. Of course, there's been a ton of times where some players in college don't get a ton of production, come into the NFL, and are extremely productive once they get into a better system with more talent around them. A prime example of that would be Danielle Hunter with the Minnesota Vikings, and Trayvon Walker here could have a really, really good career with the Cowboys. Pick 25, Buffalo Bills here, of course, came up just short this past season in a tough battle with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, Austin, 25th overall. Where do you have the Bills going moving forward?
I think they are going to look for a big-bodied receiver, Drake London. I would be absolutely terrified if the Buffalo Bills got their hands on a guy like Drake London with that 6'5" frame. They already have the premier number 1 receiver in Stephon Diggs, but then you'll have Cole Beasley in that slot, Drake London as that other outside receiver, a terrific trio. Dawson Knox is coming into his own as well at the tight end room, and then potentially they could be looking at a running back in this draft later on. So this offense is getting scarier, and Drake London is the latest example of another big-time weapon for Josh Allen.
Drake London definitely is going to be that for them. Also, Gabriel Davis did emerge a little bit, but Cole Beasley, his age, vaccination status, of course, does throw a little bit of a wrinkle into things as well. Here for Buffalo moving forward, I think they have to consider wideout and Drake London a phenomenal fit there with Josh Allen. 26, we got the Tennessee Titans here, and now I know there's a lot of questions about this team. Wide receiver makes some sense with Julio Jones not really coming to fruition what they thought he was going to be in his first year there in Tennessee. Also, quarterback Ryan Tannehill. Is he replaceable at this point? Is there a guy here that maybe you want to start grooming at the quarterback position? What's your thoughts here, Austin, for Tennessee?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about the quarterback angle. I don't think they're really ready to move on yet, but I look at that edge spot, especially with where Harold Landry is contract wise. I think he's going to have a huge market. So we're looking at that edge spot. Jermaine Johnson's going to be the pick, the former JUCO product, 14 sacks this season, was really productive for Florida State, and a guy that can really get after the passer. And I think that's what Mike Vrabel's looking for, guys that will consistently rush the passer. Jermaine Johnson is going to be a nice plug and play player if they aren't able to get a deal done with Harold Landry.
We know that the Titans do like to look along the defensive line. Jeffrey Simmons a few years back was a phenomenal pickup for them in the 20s. And I think they get another guy who's going to be extremely productive for them in Jermaine Johnson here at pick 26. Pick 27, the Buccaneers. You named them earlier on in this video as a team to watch for when it comes to a whole bunch of moves this offseason. There's a ton of questions about what this roster is going to be down the road. Where do they get started here, Austin?
I'm going to go Devontae Wyatt, a guy we hadn't really mocked in this first round. But I think along that interior, with the potential loss of Ndamukong Suh, I don't think they're going to be able to get a deal done, considering where they're at cap-wise. He's going to command quite a bit of money still, even at his age. But Devontae Wyatt, true plug-and-play guy. And I don't really think they're going to miss a beat with him being inserted into that lineup. Him and Vita Vea are going to be phenomenal up the middle. Tampa Bay is going to have to cut costs somewhere, whether that's tackle spot, which we have mock tackle in the past. Otherwise, they have to look on that interior, that defensive line.
Yeah, Devontae Wyatt here definitely does help them out long-term, saving some money against the cap. That's going to be huge for Tampa Bay over the next coming seasons. And then Green Bay here. Of course, there's some rumors now that they're going to be putting Jordan Love on the trade block, which is interesting to monitor. Of course, Aaron Rodgers, back-to-back MVP, probably want to keep him there as long as they can. How do they help keep him?
Yeah, I think they're actually going to look at that wide receiver spot. I think that's been a big question mark for the last couple of years. Who's that number 2 receiver in Green Bay? And for me, Jahan Dotson is going to be the selection. The Penn State product is a super productive receiver, a guy that will fit in very nicely into this Green Bay offense. You have him and Devontae Adams as your 2 wideouts. And they have a collection of other guys that could be serviceable 3s and 4s, but they don't have that true number 2 wideout. That's something they've definitely been missing. They've expected Aaron Rodgers to elevate the play of all these receivers, regardless of their actual talent. Jahan Dotson is a really talented receiver. So bringing him in is going to be something that makes Aaron Rodgers extremely happy.
Jahan Dotson would be a huge acquisition here for the Green Bay Packers, a guy who can get his outside the numbers. That would be huge there in Green Bay for both Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Now, pick 29, we got the Miami Dolphins here at this point. Of course, this pick comes from San Francisco from all the trading they did last offseason before the NFL draft last year. Now, Austin, with the Dolphins here in this draft, where do you think they look? Is it to help Tua Tagovailoa, or is it to improve that defense?
I think it's actually to improve that defense, and this is strictly due to values why they're making this pick. Devin Lloyd's still on the board. He's going here. First time we had mocked Miami a linebacker all mock season long. And selecting a guy like Devin Lloyd here is just all about, we had a really talented player fall in our laps. And that's what they are getting here. Devin Lloyd's all over the field, just has a good nose for the football, great instincts, guy that can generate turnovers himself. That's exactly what the Miami Dolphins need. And considering where they're at roster-wise, I mean, they have a pretty good team. However, Devin Lloyd is going to enhance that defense tremendously.
He definitely will. Going 29th overall, that's phenomenal value, like you mentioned, Austin. And I think this is a real win for the Miami Dolphins if they're able to grab him on day 1 of the NFL draft. Pick 30, the Kansas City Chiefs here, another team that has their eyes set on the Super Bowl year in, year out. Even when they lose in the AFC Conference Championship game, it feels like a disappointment. How do they get back to the Super Bowl?
It's a once again, another value selection here, Nakobe Dean. Nakobe Dean, the heat-seeking missile. I call him that a lot just because he shoots out of a cannon from that linebacker spot. Great against the run, really good, especially on runs that are to the outside. I think he has the ability to really diagnose a defense quickly. I think his mental processing is very phenomenal for where he's at. He was basically the heartbeat and pulse of that Georgia defense, was in on a ton of plays, and I love that for Kansas City. And I think in that second round they will be considering corner or safety.
Yeah, for sure. Nakobe Dean would definitely help this defense immensely. Just the value alone would help them probably get back to the Super Bowl, which is where they plan on being again next season. And then at pick 31, we got the Bengals, the team who just represented the AFC in the Super Bowl. Of course, came up just a little bit short there against the LA Rams. Austin, do you think that they'll be back anytime soon to the bowl? And then from there, how do they get there?
Yeah, they're going to be one of those consistent contending teams in that AFC. That AFC North is going to get tougher next year, I think, with the reemergence of Baltimore. It's not going to be an easy division. I think in Cleveland's another team we can't forget about either. They are a very talented team in their own right. A way they can get back, in my opinion, is drafting Trevor Penning. He's a nasty offensive tackle. I know a lot of Bengals fans think that they would rather have a guard, but I think tackle to me is more of a need at this point in time. They definitely can make some improvements at that guard spot. However, Trevor Penning, he's a nasty offensive lineman, really gritty, gets after it, and he's an ultimate competitor. And that's something that this Bengals offensive line definitely needs heading into next season.
Of course, Trevor Penning would be a huge acquisition for them. I know some Bengals fans are going to point to Aaron Donald's dominance near the back end of that Super Bowl matchup, but let's not forget how good Von Miller looked coming off the edge in the first half of that game as well. Tackle is a definite need there, and I think Trevor Penning would be a huge upgrade for this team long term. Which leads us to our final pick here in the first round. Again, if you guys have enjoyed the mock draft up to this point, leave a like, subscribe, check out our other videos on the channel. Don't forget to use code utility20 at manscaped.com for 20% off plus free worldwide shipping for any Manscaped products. Now, Austin, here we are. The Detroit Lions with this pick coming from the LA Rams. Pick 2, you had them going with the defensive edge. Where do you have them going here?
I have them going with the 6'2 corner in Kaiir Elam. I think they have an opportunity to draft a quarterback in that second round. I think they should feel pretty comfortable at that point. But Kaiir Elam, he's a guy you don't want to risk being selected before you. Just with his frame and his ability to make plays on the ball, I think that's something that this Detroit Lions secondary has been missing. So with their 2 selections, great value with the Kyrie Elam at 32. And, defensively, they're going to be so much better. And offensively, they have some options later on in the draft.
Kyrie Elam, a really good pickup for this Lions football team. They need to improve defensively, and he's going to help them do that along with Kayvon Thibodeau, who you had them go with 2nd overall. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's mock draft. If you did, leave a like, subscribe as well. Make sure you guys check out our other videos on the channel as well. A ton of different NFL videos. Go check it out. And thanks again so much for watching. We'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.